Good morning everybody. As you can see, I have my table set up ready for my ankle bracelet tutorial, but I don't know if you can hear from my voice. I have some sort of flu or COVID and it's horrid. So my ears are all stuffed up and I can't hear very well. My nose is stuffed up. I look like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I've been blowing my nose so much. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this one for a couple of days till I feel better, because I really need to focus on that. But I have got something else for you guys, so we're going to cover this up. I had a message which I found this morning. One of my subscribers is making a pair of moccasins, which is absolutely fantastic, amazing. I'd really love to make a pair of moccasins someday. So that made me really inspired, in spite of the fact that I feel a bit rough. I can never sit still when I'm poorly anyway. I'm not one of those people that goes and lays in bed. I can't do it. I just can't. I have to potter about and do something. So anyway, hi. Your issue with the moccasins. I don't know what stage you're at, whether your moccasins are assembled or whether you've, got the piece of leather or... So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover this from all angles. So please do watch to the end, because I'm going to give you lots of ideas of how you could go about it. But then some of those ideas might be if your fabric is just a loose piece. Say you've got the piece of fabric that you're going to stitch into your moccasin and it's still loose. But I'm not sure, maybe you've already made the moccasins and then you've just, you've got this area that you need to work on that's already a part of a made piece. So I'm going to tell you how I would go about it if it was, say, just a piece of fabric and it's not made up. But then also I will show you how I would do it if it was made up, and if you're literally working with just, the piece of fabric within the moccasin that you've got to work on this area. So I'm going to show you all that. I'm going to give you a little bit of advice on the beads you should use, because believe you me, it makes a world of difference, and thread. And also, there are some techniques for stitching beads to your fabric in such a way that they will hold a lot better in place, rather than sort of moving around. So there's a technique for that as well, which I will show you. And I think your thread's going to be important as well. You need something that's sort of thick enough and stiff enough, because some threads have that flexibility. Like when you make the fringed earrings, for instance, those are Native American style fringed earrings. I have to use one thread for the little triangle at the top, which is in brick stitch, because I want it to be nice and stiff. I don't want that bending or, having any kind of movement to it. So I would use a thick thread for that and a stiff thread. But when it comes to the tassels, you want them to flow. You want some movement. You want some... So I would use a more flexible thread, something in a cotton that's not stiff, that doesn't sit, rigid, and so that the tassels will flow. But you don't want that sort of a thread for this sort of a task. You want something stiff that, when you leave it to sit, it stays like it, like this. It's very stiff. It's very, there's not going to be, if you made tassels out of this, they'd sit stiff. And if you did them too tight, they'd sort of stick out wonky. And so this is the type of thread you would need. Would highly recommend that. We'll zoom in so you can see. This is called Wildfire. I usually use, for most projects, I'll use something like a 6 pound or an 8 pound fire line, which is this stuff. And you could use an 8 pound fire line. You really could. 8 pound fire line would probably work well as well. That's what I tend to use mostly. So I probably, if it was me, I might buy an 8 pound fire line to try this project, or I might try the Wildfire. But I've only got Wildfire in green, and that would be the gauge or the thickness or whatever you call it that I would use. So there's that. That's the thread I'd recommend. That one, or an 8 pound fire line, which is actually fishing line. If you buy it from the bead stores, like the Beadsmith, it's going to cost you more. If you can find a fishing supply store or a fishing tackle, maybe you could get it ordered in there cheaper. I don't know. It's cheaper for fishing than it is for beading. Don't ask me why. But yeah, so that's your thread. Now, when it comes to your beads, you absolutely want to buy Miyuki seed beads. I know it sounds like bead snobbery, but it's absolutely not. I'm just going to give you a little example. I have a few of these left that I didn't get rid of. I kept for the children, so that if the kids want to do some projects, which they often do, even though they're boys, they love it. Don't have to be a girl to enjoy beading. In fact, some of the best jewellers and jewellery makers are men. So a lot of the channels I follow for arts and crafts and all kind of things are not ladies. So it really does, you know, it's universal. In fact, I think sometimes men do make the more beautiful jewellery, you know. So it just all depends, doesn't it? But anyway, right, so beads. Now these are all supposed to be 11O seed beads. These ones call themselves, these particular ones here. Let's see if we can move that over. There you go. So these are all meant to be the same size bead, but these are just, you know, sort of cheap beads, if you like. So if you look closely, you can see the holes, for one, are different sizes. They're not all the same. Let's take these two. Just put them on my finger. Even the holes in them are different sizes. And, you know, from this distance, with the naked eye, they look about the same, don't they? Look very similar. But once you actually get those on the needle, and given they're all meant to be 11Os, so let's take a few of these, just a few, put them on our needle. When you actually look super, super close, you will notice, I'm trying to get the light, sorry guys, that there are slight variations in the shape and size of those beads once you're up close. And then when you start adding some different colours, maybe you got them from a different company online, and you start adding those in, you'll start to see that not only are the groups of colours slightly different shape and size, but within each group of colour, you know, this one here on the end, for instance, I can see, I'm used to looking at beads, it's like a trained eye, I guess, but that one there, the second one in, that is much slimmer than this one up here, for instance. This one here on the end is definitely fatter and rounder than these two next to it. And these two here, three, they look really similar, but it's hard to tell because they have a sheen on the surface, and they're certainly a different shape and size from the brown one beside it. So once you can do a couple of rows and get away with it, but then once you get to 3, 4, 5 rows, everything starts to sit wonky and not quite right, because your beads are very slightly uneven, and believe you me, that little hair of a difference, like these two here, I don't know if it shows on camera, let's slide the rest off, but it's very hard to try and show on camera, but let's just get in close. If you really, really look at those two beads up close, they're different shapes. They're not even. They're not the same. And that is going to ruin your work. So I don't care if they say they're from Japan, this, that and the other, wonderful beads, blah, blah, blah. I believe you me, I have bought so many different kinds of beads thinking, yeah, bead snobbery or whatever it is, you know, and it's absolutely not. I can absolutely 100% say, and I'm not endorsed, I don't get anything from them. I have no affiliation with Miyuki, but I can 100% hand on heart tell you that Miyuki seed beads are absolutely the best quality in the entire world. So there are no beads like Miyuki seed beads. They're like, they're one of a kind. They are the top, you know, the best in the world. And unfortunately, they are the most expensive. But here's a little example of some Miyukis. These are a matte gold. And also you can buy them galvanized, Duracoat, all these different types that you can to sort of guarantee that you're not going to lose the colouring off your beads. And when you look at these close up, trying to see what you're seeing, guys, there you go. You look at those really close up, they are absolutely 100% spot on, all exactly the same size, the same width, the same depth, the same, you know, sort of bulbousness, if you like, the same, exactly the same size hole in every bead. How they do it, and they've been doing it for centuries. You know, I'd love to go inside that Miyuki factory and see how they make their beads. Just absolutely amazing. But yeah, outstanding quality. You need Miyuki seed beads. There's a close runner-up, which is Toho, but I don't buy their beads because a Toho 11-0, sounds crazy if you don't know about beads, it gets complicated. A Toho 11-0 is going to be different from a Miyuki 11-0. So, yeah, each brand sizes them slightly differently, so that you can't mix and match, you know, half Toho, half Miyuki, because the beads aren't going to be even. So if you start with Miyuki, you need to stick with Miyuki. For whichever project, obviously. You could then, if you're doing a separate project, go and choose Toho. You might prefer the colours. But for each project, stick with one brand of beads, because that's going to make a difference as well. Even the very slightest, literally the hair of a millimetre difference in the shape of those beads, your whole work's going to be wonky by the end, because when you accumulate those rows together, that little hair of a width ends up a millimetre, and then you know, half a millimetre, then a millimetre, and it kind of expands the, what's the word, the imbalance of the sizes kind of grows as your work grows, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm explaining it right, but anyway, so that's about the beads and the thread. Now, ideally, you want your piece of fabric to be, doesn't matter what size it is, because you can buy these, it's an embroidery ring. You can buy these in any size, literally. You can get them this size, little one, the size of this roll of thread. I think you can get tiny ones like this as well. And they do come in handy. You don't have to have this. I'm going to show you an alternative as well. So, but what I would do if I was, you know, if the ideal situation in your fabric's, you know, loose and it's not attached to a project, you'd take a piece of fabric and you'd take some of this mesh fabric. And then what I would do is you separate your ring and you would very loosely tack this, you know, with a tacking stitch. Just stitch it, you know, big, it doesn't matter, big clumsy stitches, because you're going to cut them off anyway and take it off afterwards. So you would tack it down, and then you would add that fabric into your embroidery ring and pull it really tight. Yeah, so what that does is that holds everything. So just tighten that up. Oh, that's a bit hard. Right, so once that is tight, imagine your piece of fabric is stitched. You now have this nice tight piece of work. So as you're beading, nothing's moving around, nothing's warping up and down as you're stitching and doing this kind of movement. It's all tight to this ring, you know. And if you don't have an embroidery ring, and to be honest, they're so cheap, so cheap. You can probably buy a set and it gives you like half a dozen sizes from tiny all the way up for just a few quid on Amazon. Or you could get yourself an old picture frame, and you could, you know, remove this piece here, cut these two bits at an angle, and then put this bar to here, make it, and you could make it whatever size then you wanted. And you could simply take a piece of fabric and use some kind of drawing pins, or, you know, board pins that you tack, and tack it at the corners and the middle, pin it on, and then pin it to the other side. You can, you know, fashion yourself something out of an old picture frame or wood or whatever. You could try something like that. And if you really don't want this fabric on the back, but like I say, you're just tacking it around the edge. So you're putting your design in this area here. When it's all finished, you would turn it over, take it off your thing, turn it over, and then you would cut this fabric away. So the only fabric remaining would be what's the little patch that's got your stitches, where your beads are on the front, and then you'd cut the rest away. But you might not even want to do that. You might think, well, I don't really want the feel of that next to my skin, in which case don't do any of that. Just get yourself a small ring and attach your fabric directly into the ring. So instead of adding the backing, yeah, you would just add your fabric in, and just, you know, in the same way. It's another piece, that's a piece of leather, it's a glove for making gloves. You know, you would put that in, tighten it up, and obviously your fabric's going to sit tight like that, so you've got this nice surface to work on. But all that being said, maybe you have already assembled your moccasins, and you're going to have to work round, you know, a small area like this without being able to put it inside something, in which case I'm going to show you how I would do that. So either way, the stitches that I'm going to show you, the stitching technique here, will be the same, whether it's on a frame, whether it's just a piece of fabric loose or whatever. That technique will be the same. So you can do any of all of, you know, what I've just shown you, or you can do none of that and just take your fabric and start from here without a frame. But I would recommend it because having that tautness, you know, and being able to pick your work up without any of this movement, you know, you'd pick it up in the frame and it's just nice and tight, and you can sort of work across without any, what's the word? It's not, there's no maneuverability, it's just nice and tight and everything holding in place. But obviously if that's not an option, then this is the way we're going to do it. So I'm just going to take a needle, thread it up. You'll need a size 10 beading needle, which they do go through, you know, as long as you've not got a real thick chunky leather, which then is going to be an issue. But I'm assuming you know what you're doing with your needles and whatnot. So this video is actually specifically for one person, but it might be helpful to lots of people, who knows. So yeah, give me a minute. I'm going to go and thread my needle, grab a few beads, not these crappy things, and I'll be right back, and I'll show you how to do the actual stitching technique that will help stop your beads from, you know, wavering or moving, and they'll stay a bit more uniformed. Okay, I'll be right back. Okay, so I've got my needle threaded. I've got 3 different colours of bead. I'll zoom in. Alright, so, and this is the brand. Obviously, if you've never used them before, Mayuki. It's really actually interesting because I came across a documentary about the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings, and there's a whole documentary about a place called the Mayuki Bridge, which yeah, a story I had no idea about, which was quite interesting. So yeah, there's obviously, I don't know if they come from the town of Mayuki and that's why they're called Mayuki, but it'd be interesting to know. Maybe that's where their factory is. I really don't know, but yeah, fascinating. And you know, the Japanese history of beading and beadwork and their artistry and stuff is just absolutely fascinating. Samurai warriors used to do a lot of beading as well, and kumihimo beading, which is quite interesting. Oh, and by the way, those embroidery rings, you can get them square as well. You don't have to have round ones, you can get square ones. So right, the very first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to zoom out a tiny tidge, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my piece of fabric, and let's just assume we're working in this area, we're making a pattern. What I'm going to do is put that down. I'm going to use my board as a bit of a guide, and then say we want to start here. So I'm going to take my ruler, make sure I've got that all lined up, and then I'm going to take, I've got a piece of tailor's chalk, but you could use any kind of chalk. Point being is you don't want it to be permanent, you don't really want to use pen or marker or something like that. I'm just going to make a line across my work, and that's going to be my initial guideline, my first guide, just to make sure. So it doesn't have to be super dark, it's just a little guide. So what I'm going to do is take my thread, I've threaded my needle, and if you are working with these thick threads, especially with the thick threads, you're going to need to take the end of your thread, because they're really hard to thread, because you're dealing with a round thread and you're dealing with a flat eye when it comes to beading needles. So take a pair of pliers. It can't be ribbed, it's got to be smooth, because the ribbing obviously will ruin it. And it has to be a really nice pair of pliers that really do sit, so they meet. I've got pairs of pliers where I've tried to do it and it just slides out and doesn't do anything to the thread. So, you know, you want a decent pair. You could pluck, you know, you could pluck hairs out your chin with these, I'm sure. They're that good, you know. But anyway, take a little end of your thread and pinch it in between your pliers, and then pull it through. Just pull it like that so it goes flat. So that will make the end of your thread there flat instead of round, and you'll be able to get that through your needle much easier. So if you're not used to beading, obviously that's one of those little secrets. And then I'm going to make a tiny knot, a very tiny knot, just to hold this when I first go through my fabric. And we're going to start off by coming underneath, and what I'm going to do is put my needle, say I want my beads to start here or here, I'm going to initially put my needle in further along, say like up here. And now you've got, this is where you want to be really accurate and try and come through the middle of your line, absolute middle of it, like so. Or if you don't, if you come through on the edge, make sure every time you come through on the edge of your line, you know. So it's important to try and get that accuracy as well. But I would start there, and I would literally do a couple of stitches, working back towards where I want my work to start. And this is going to secure your thread onto your fabric without having lots of ugly knots, you know. And then I'm going to come back up. And you have to bear with me a bit slow because I'm doing this at arm's length, which is not really ideal. You'd obviously have your work a lot closer to you. So you want to come up, you know, right on the end of that stitch. So I'm going to have to turn it around to face the light. Tiny as they are. So you want to come right in on the end of that stitch. And just stitch backwards like that to where you want to begin. I'm just going to do the 2 stitches. But what we're doing is just basically, instead of tying, you know, quite a few knots or whatever to secure our work, and then you have a lumpy bit in the back, what we want to do is, oh, I've got to get a loop now. Well, anyway, this is just an example. I've got a knot now, but never mind. Right, what you want to do is, so you've worked your way back to where you want to start, you know, 2 or 3 stitches or whatever. And then you're going to do the same again. Come up as close to that stitch as you can, to the end of that stitch. Like I said, this is very hard to do at arm's length, so obviously you're going to have your work a lot closer to you, so you have to forgive me if my stitches are a bit wonky. Right, so you're going to start, I'm just going to show you the technique basically. So you get back to where you want to start. Yeah, my stitches are wonky, look. And you're going to pick up 2 beads. 2 of your seed beads. Let's go in a little bit. Right, once you've got your 2 beads, bring them down to your work, to your piece of fabric, like so. Get them nicely lined up, like so. And then you're going to put your needle in. Excuse my sniffling, I've got some sort of horrid bug. Right, so now you've attached 2 of your beads, like so. Now what you want to do is you want to bring your needle up between those 2 beads. Oop, miles away. Put on your line. Try and get that on the line. Oh my gosh, it's very hard to do at arm's length. Sorry guys. So try and get it on your line. Bring your needle up. And then we're going to go back through just this second bead. Like so. Like so. And then you can either add 2 at a time or 1 at a time. I usually do 2. So say maybe I want to change colours. Maybe I'm doing a pattern. So I add another 2 beads. Bring them down to my work. And again, try and line my thread up with my chalk line, so we're nice and straight, and then straighten down the middle. Doing your very best to stick to your line. You'll probably be able to stick to your line a lot better than I am, because like I say, I'm doing this at arm's length to be under the camera, so it's very hard to see what I'm doing there. So like so, nice and tight, but not too tight. You don't want to pull your beads so that they sink down into your work. You want them to, you know, sit nicely, like so. When you've done your next two, you want to do the same again. Come up between the two you've just added on your line as best you can. In between them, oops. Like so. It's fiddly. So I'm just going to move it away from the camera so I can make sure I'm on the line. Sorry guys, it's just up so close. So far away, I mean. And then put your needle up through your, between the two again. And then we go back down through one. Oops, sorry. Back down through one. So you come up between those two beads, go down that one, like so. And you should find that secures your work really, really nicely. That technique, it sort of helps to sort of go, it's going through one and then through another. For some reason, that really helps to, it secures your work and helps it to sit in a straight line. So again, we're going to pick up two of whichever colour, and then that way you can just follow your pattern. So I believe you have a pattern and you've got all your rows of beads, you know, laid out. So just stick to the pattern, obviously, and each time line your thread up with a line, go through the middle again, nice and close. Try and align your needle so it's touching that bead, so you know you're right close up to it. Get that through, like so. Again, give it a little pull, but not so tight that the hole in your bead sort of comes down and you're bringing your beads down in this direction. You still want them to sit, you know, in that little, so they're slightly popped up, like so. You don't want them to be digging into your fabric. So you can see there how they're coming along nicely. So again, you're going to come up between those two beads, like so. That is hard at arm's length, but you know, the idea is to just give you the general idea of what the technique is. So if mine's not as perfect as it should be, it's because I can't see what I'm doing at arm's length. But yeah, and then we've come up between these two that we've just added, and then we just go down one. Like so. And then you're just going to keep going like that, and every time you add the beads, it sort of shoves them up, you know, and holds them in place. And essentially you're going through each pair like that. I don't know why, it just really does work. Because I've done some bead embroidery, I've made brooches and stuff like that, and I do that in that same technique with the backing on the embroidery ring. So say I had a square like this, I might do the beads onto the fabric in the shape of a butterfly, and then when it's all finished, I'll cut out the butterfly, you know, cut the fabric away, and then put a backing on it. So I've done, you know, bead embroidery in that sense. I've never made a pair of moccasins. I would so love to. That's why I'm making this video now. When you sent me that message saying help, I just thought, oh wow, you know. And as soon as you spent all this money and all this time and all this effort to be then stuck at a point where, no, I can't finish my project because it just won't sit straight, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to make this video for you. So yeah, you've added those two, you're coming up here again, kind of put your needle up against that bead so you know that, you know, it's going to be tight in the right place, if that makes sense. So it's, you know, you can feel that bead against your needle, because if you're a bit far away, you're going to get gaps. And again, yeah, just keep going like that, really, and that's all there is to it. So I'll add another 2. Oh, what have I done? Well, I don't know what I've done now. I've lost track now, too much talking. Let's go back up here. And we go back up and through the 1, don't we? I've just done it wrong, but never mind. You get the idea. So, right. We need to now add, we should be coming out of that bead, shouldn't we? Let's just back up and go through there. Hang on a second, let me just back it up. Sorry guys, I'm not coming out the right place. But yeah, so yeah, we've come up. So I'm just doing this bit close up so I can see what I'm doing, because it is a little hard at arm's length to show you this. But yeah, back to where we should be. So I don't know what I did there. Like I said, I've got COVID, so my brain's not really working properly. But yeah, I'll just do it one more time because I don't know what I did there. Right, so yeah, you're coming out with your bead. So let's add another 2. And, you know, whatever your pattern may be, I'm just adding colours just as an example. Yep, follow your line again. Try and keep it nice and straight. Get that needle up against the bead and go down through your work. Don't tangle your thread up, which I've just done. There you go, like so. And they just pop into line. And again, up between those 2 beads there. Oh, I'm way off. Now there you go, that's what you don't want to do. Somehow, I don't know how I've done that, gone off my line. So I'm going to take my needle off the thread. If that happens, if you go off the line, don't worry. Don't try and stitch back through, obviously that's not going to work. What you want to do is take your thread and pull it back out from the other side. So that's the stitch there. Just undo it. Just pull it out. Rethread your needle and come back up in the correct place. So hang on, I'm just going to do that. Right, so we're coming back out the right place now. And then, yeah, coming between the 2 beads and then go back down that second one there. So that's all you're going to do all the way to the end of whatever your row, you know, whatever your pattern is. And then usually when I get to the end, to the very end, just to secure everything, I will go down in front of that bead. And then I will come back up almost in the exact same spot. Try and get it so that needle is actually sort of chafing across the front of that bead, so it's, you know, definitely nice and close. There we go. No, a bit further over, sorry. It is really, really a challenge at arm's length, I have to say. Making these videos is a lot harder than it looks. Because like I say, you've got to do everything at arm's length. and then checking my work. It like craning my neck up to look over the top of the camera and see in the viewfinder what I'm actually doing. So that's more challenging than it looks. So then, yeah, I'll just go down all the beads, every single one. Make sure you don't miss any, or you're going to have a little piece of thread showing at the end, and that's going to spoil your work. So get your needle down every single bead and pull your thread through. Make them nice and tight this time, and the same again. So you're almost chafing down that bead, actually touching it, and go right into that bit of fabric there. This is fake leather, this is faux leather, and then nice and tight like that. And if you really wanted to, you could repeat that again. You could, coming out of this end, we could come back up one more time. This is just a finishing, you know, you don't try and add all your beads at once like this, or they're not going to sit correctly if you add them like that. And then if you, for some reason, if you stitch them one at a time, they don't seem to sit correctly either. It's just weird. So if you add them in twos like I've just done, like I've just shown you, and as you know, as a sort of an ending, a finishing off touch, if you like, go down them again. You should have space to go down twice. If not, and it gets too tight, don't force your needle. If you force it, pull it too tight and force it, and it doesn't want to go through, you might crack one of your beads and break them, and then you've got to start all over again. So if it doesn't want to go and you feel that tightness, don't bother. But you should, like I say, be able to get down at least twice. And that should align everything up nicely into a nice straight line. And just because of the technique, look, even when you push them, you can push them, they don't lose the shape the way they're meant to sit too badly. Look at that. So yeah, that is how I would advise to attach your beads to your moccasins. And then, you know, there's no fabric on the inside, it's just a few stitches, and you know, how neatly you do your stitches obviously is going to make a difference, but that's not going to feel uncomfortable on your skin when you wear it either. So you know, so there you go. That's how I would go about it. So thank you for your comment and for your request. I was more than happy to do that for you, because yeah, just the thought that you're making a pair of moccasins is like, wow, that is so cool. And, you know, if you wouldn't mind, please do email me a picture of your moccasins when you finish, because I'd love to see them. I'd love to actually make a pair myself. Maybe you could do a video for us. Maybe you could show us how you made your moccasins. I don't know. There's probably videos out there on YouTube anyway, but I really would love one day to make a pair of moccasins. So well done to you. And yeah, just I struck a chord there when you sent me that message and said, help, I've spent all this money and making these moccasins, and I just can't get this beading thing to sit correctly. I thought, oh, I have to help. So I was actually quite excited to make this video. So there you go, that's what I would do. Just like life advice, when someone says to me, oh, what should I do? I say, oh, this is what I would do. So there you go, that's what I would do. That's the technique I use for, you know, getting my beads to sit the way I want them to. Yeah, so that's about it. Yeah, thanks guys for watching. I hope that's helpful to lots of people. Just a quick short note as well. I didn't say it because I thought it might be obvious, but then it might not be obvious to you. When you've got that far, obviously then you want to do your other rows, don't you, for your pattern. So you're just going to go through the back, and you just want to come up, you know, as close to this bead here on the end, beside it obviously, like so. I don't know if you can see that. So you're going to come up sort of alongside this bead here, and just come up there, and then obviously then you're going to do exactly the same and work your second row. But yeah, you want to try and get it nice and close to that bead there. So you'll be coming out right where that bead is, and then obviously pick up your two. I'll put my colours away now, But yeah, pick up 2 of your beads, and then you're gonna obviously turn your work round and do exactly the same again. So you're gonna make sure they sit where you want them, like so. Chafe down that bead. So we've got no line this time, but chafe down it so it's nice and tight. So you got it sitting like that, look. And then pull it through. Like so. And then you're going to do that exact same technique as you did on the other row. You're going to come up between the 2 beads. And it gets easier once you've added a row because it's easier to come up in the right place. You know, because you can't go beyond these beads. You want it nice and snug and tight. So then you come up between those 2. Exactly the same way you did on the first row. And then go back down that second one. Just like you did on the first row, it's going to be the same. But obviously you need to step from this to this, don't you? This row to this row. So that's how I would do that. And as you can see, you've got them nicely aligned. So you can stick to your pattern, you know? And that would be a bit easier. And then you'll carry on adding your 2. And once you've done that first row, because this is not going to shift and wiggle, it's going to hold the next line, and it should all stay in place really nicely, and you shouldn't have that issue you're having with the winky wonky and the pattern not sitting as it should. So you see how it's, so if you once you've done that completed that row and done your tightening up with your extra rows, come up, beside this bead here. So you want to, beside that bead, come up here with your needle, so it's sitting against, and if you can, make it nice and close, and then add your first 2. So once they're aligned like that, carry on in your pattern and just do exactly the same thing to the end, and then reinforce it with your extra rows. So I just thought I'd put that in the end, because you might be wondering, well, how do I jump from this row then to the second row? So just line them up like that. So obviously, your accuracy of getting your needle in the right place so that they sit exact. So, it's just being really careful where you put your needle, and yeah, and then the same again. So finish your row, reinforce a couple of times, and then the third row, you want to come up here next to this bead and put your needle so that your needle's coming out here in line. Okay, I hope that's helpful. And once again, goodbye, have a great day. It's actually goodbye this time. I just thought I'd add that in case you not quite sure how you get to your second row. So again, thanks everybody for watching. Have a great day. See you all soon in the next video. Bye for now.